Hello and welcome to another IELTS essay writing video. This is the first video I have made since relocating from Shanghai, China to my native land here in Canada. So I send you warm regards from my home here in Ottawa, Ontario. Today we're looking at 8 different IELTS essay questions. All of these questions appeared somewhere in the world in 2012, and there is a chance that you may see these questions on your, or you may see one of these questions on your IELTS examination. So I thought an idea would be for us to discuss the questions and talk about how to respond to the questions effectively. If you find this video helpful, please visit my blog at IELTS.com. The first question we are going to look at appeared on the academic exam on the 12th of May 2012 in Melbourne, Australia. And the question reads, in many countries, prison is considered the best way to decrease crime. However, education is often argued to be a more effective way. Which opinion do you most agree with? Okay, so if we break the question down, we're given a little bit of background in these first two sentences, which sort of set the stage for the problem that we are asked to comment on. So the basic issue is that some people are of the opinion that prison is the most effective way to reduce criminal activity. Other people are of the opinion that education is a better way to reduce criminal activity within society. Our instruction words. The question asks, which opinion do you most agree with? Now, when we see a question like this, students sometimes get confused by qualifying words like most. And it's important to remember that when the question reads like this question does, it's possible for us to agree 100% or disagree 100% with this statement. So the word most is sort of irrelevant because I know when you read this you might think that you're supposed to maybe agree 70% with this and then 30%, you know, maybe show the other side of the argument that there are, there is merit to the disagree point of view, but that's not entirely necessary. This question is really just asking us which side do we feel is the better side? Which side do we most agree with? Now, to respond to this question, yes, you could respond in a discussion essay style and look at both sides, but my opinion is that this question would be much more straightforward. The response to this question would be much more straightforward if you structured your essay as an argument essay. So basically, you would be choosing one side. Maybe you believe that prison is the best way to decrease crime in society, or you might feel that education is the best way to decrease crime in society. So choose one of those sides and then show support for that side. And that's the entire essay right there. So if we were to write an argument essay, of course we would come up with some sort of thesis. So perhaps if we agreed that that education is the better or more effective way to decrease crime in society, we might say something like, it is argued, or or it is felt, or the opinion of this is supported. So education is the most effective way to reduce criminal activity within a society. So we state very clearly in our thesis what our position is. Now, if anybody is asking what a thesis is, you should stop watching this video right now and go and watch my video on essay structure, and then come back and watch this one. We're not going to talk about structure in detail today, so if anything is confusing, you need to go back and review that video before you continue this one. Okay, so that would be my suggestion for a question that is structured like this. Come up with a simple thesis, choose one of the sides, and then argue that thesis. Then come up with two supporting points that show your position in action. Come up with two examples that that show what you're trying to prove in real life, and flesh out the rest of the essay that way. So don't fall into this trap where you feel as though you have to show both sides, or you have to support both sides, because that's not what the question is asking. It's simply asking you, which do you agree with more? It's not saying discuss both sides. So in my opinion, the most straightforward way to respond to a question like this is to write a straightforward argument essay. Now let's continue to the next question that a student sent to me via email. Now this appeared on the general exam on the same date, the 12th of May 2012, in Mexico City, Mexico. What do you think of people who spend a lot of money on things that are unnecessary when so many people in the world have nothing to eat? Now, the interesting thing about questions like this is that the sort of background information that you're given is coupled with the question. So we're not given a few sentences and then a question. We're just given sort of everything together as one. And that's fine. That doesn't make anything any more complicated. All we have to do here is we have to pinpoint exactly what we are being asked to do. So basically we're given the scenario that people are using a lot of money to buy things that they perhaps do not need, so things that are unnecessary. And they're doing this when there are many people in the world who do not have enough money to eat. Okay, so there is really only one way to respond to this question. We're going to respond using an argument essay structure, and we're going to share a very straightforward opinion on this topic. Now my suggestion to you, as always, is try not to take the middle ground. So instead of saying, well, sometimes it's okay for people to spend money on things that are unnecessary, but sometimes they should be aware of people, in other areas around the world who are without things to eat. If you start to take these sort of middle positions, you're going to find it very difficult to word them, for one thing. If you just choose one side of the argument, don't forget that the point that your goal on the IELTS examination is to score as high as you possibly can. And in my personal opinion, the best way to do that is to set yourself up to write an essay structure where your chances of making a mistake are minimized. So to do this, you want to choose the most straightforward way to compose your essay. And for argument essays, to just choose one side of the argument will reduce your chances of making grammatical errors and wording errors quite a bit. So I suggest you do that. So we're going to write an argument essay in response to this. Now, of course, that means that we have to come up with a thesis for this. So perhaps we might compose something like, it is argued that people who squander money when so much of the world is poor need to change their lifestyle. Okay, so that's the argument that we're making, is that, you know, people who waste money, squander is a word that means waste. I'll type it here in case that's a new word for some people. Squander money. So it is argued that people who squander money when so much of the world is poor need to change their lifestyle. So our feeling is that it is unfair, that people should think more about others when it comes to the way that they exercise their financial strength. Now, that's the thesis. Following the thesis, of course, we want to come up with a couple of points that would support that. So we might write a sentence, for example, like, the benefits of such a change would ramify themselves as A and B, and these areas will be analyzed in this essay. Okay, so that would be the thesis sentence and the outline sentence. And then, as you know, the rest of the essay would just kind of follow that map. So basically there would be a supporting sentence that would talk about point A, which we brought up in our outline sentence, and then a supporting second supporting paragraph that would talk about point B. And those paragraphs would tie back to our thesis. Okay, so another argument essay response to this question. Now let's go on to our next question. This is a question that appeared in the UK on the academic exam on the 19th of May 2012. Technological and scientific advances are changing the foods people eat. Some argue that these changes may be harmful to a person's health. Others challenge this. Write about both sides and share your opinion. Background information in this first sentence. This sets the stage for the question. Technological and scientific advances are changing the foods people eat. From this background sentence, we don't know what kind of essay we're going to write. We're just given sort of the general topic and the issue at hand. Then the next two sentences illustrate that there are opposing opinions regarding this issue. Some argue that these changes may be harmful to a person's health. Others challenge this. We still don't know what kind of essay we're going to write. It's when we get to this last sentence that we see the instruction, write about both sides and share your opinion. Okay, so this essay question is telling us very directly that we should be looking at the merits that that can be argued for both sides of this issue. So that means that we have to find support for this. Some argue that these changes may be harmful to a person's health. So we would have to find some evidence that that would show that this is true. And then we would also have to find some evidence that would support the opposing point of view. And then, after we've analyzed these two sides, we would share our opinion on this topic. So, as you can probably guess, we would be writing this essay in a discussion essay structure. So we would be looking at different points of view, and then in the final paragraph of the essay, we would be sharing with our reader which point of view we feel is stronger. Okay, so that essay question would be responded to in a discussion essay style. Let's look at the next question. This appeared on the academic exam, 26th of May 2012, and again that was in the UK. The traditional lifestyles of many people in developing countries are attracting increasing amounts of tourists. This tourism discourages modernization in these areas. Do you agree or disagree? Now, again, we are given some background information here. And when we finish reading the background information, we still don't know what kind of essay we're going to write. But basically, the background information tells us that many developing countries are experiencing an influx of tourists, and this tourism is discouraging the progress, the development of these areas. Now, the instruction words say, do you agree or disagree? Which is very straightforward. Personally, I find these sorts of essays the easiest to write because right away we know exactly what the essay is going to look like. It's going to be a very straightforward argument essay. We're going to choose a side, whether we agree that tourism is discouraging modernization, or whether we disagree. And then we're going to come up with 2 points to support whatever side we choose, and a bit of evidence for each of those points. And we're going to tie everything back to a very strong thesis. So I feel that question is quite straightforward, and I hope you do too. Let's continue to the next one. Now, this is a question that appeared on the general exam, the 26th of May 2012, in Mauritius. People prefer to use their own transport nowadays. What could society do to encourage people to use public transport? So, now this question might be a little bit tricky for some students. So the first background sentence just sort of sets the stage again. We're being told people prefer to use their own transport nowadays. So they like to use a private car. They would prefer that to using, say, the bus or the subway, or I guess perhaps not a taxi, a bus, a subway, some other form of public transportation. So the question's asking us, what could society do to encourage people to use public transportation? So we're not really looking at different points of view in this essay, but we are suggesting things. We're going to have to suggest some courses of action that society could introduce to help push people to use public forms of transportation. So we can do this by structuring our essay as an argument essay. And what would happen is that the thesis that we write would include a few of the major suggestions that we want to analyze in the body of the essay. So for example, the thesis for this essay could read, it is argued that people could, point A, and point B, to encourage the public to use public transportation. That could be our thesis. So it is argued that people could this and this to encourage the public to use citywide transportation or public transportation. Okay, so we suggest the ideas that we have in the thesis, and then in our outline sentence we would state something that would show that we're going to test the viability or the plausibility of these ideas in the body of the essay. So we could say something like the plausibility of these proposed solutions will be analyzed in this essay. Okay, so when the reader reads through the introduction, they see, oh, okay, so the writer is suggesting 2 or 3 points, and then the writer's telling me that they're going to analyze these points in detail in the rest of the essay. So when your examiner finishes reading your introduction, they feel that they understand what sort of structure you're setting up for the essay as a whole. Okay, and that will score you points, particularly with cohesion, because that helps tie the different paragraphs within your essay together. So that would be an argument essay structure. Let's go to the next question. This is a question that appeared on the academic exam the 9th of June 2012 in Athens, Greece. The problem of obesity is becoming an increasingly pressing issue. Some people say the price of fattening foods should be increased to help deter the growth of this health problem. Do you agree with this policy or disagree? Okay, so obesity, if that is a new word, it refers to people who are not only overweight but extremely overweight, to the point where their weight is a health issue for them. A pressing issue is an issue that is becoming that is serious in nature. Some people say that the price of fattening foods should be increased to help deter the growth of this health problem. So deter means to slow. So basically, this background is just telling us that that society should try to curb the intake of fattening foods among people with health issues related to obesity, for the sake of the health of these people. And then we're asked, do we agree with this policy or disagree? So as I was telling you before, these are the kinds of questions that I like. They're very, very straightforward. Do you agree or do you disagree? It's very simple. So if you agree with this, then you're going to write a thesis that says it is agreed that that the price of unhealthy and fattening foods should be raised in an effort to lower the level of or the size of this health issue. We could say something like that. So that would be our thesis. Or we could disagree and say, you know, it is disagreed that that the price of fattening foods should be raised. Then we have to come up with 2 points to support this thesis, and then we have to flesh these out in the supporting paragraphs. So that would involve an example for paragraph 1 and an example for paragraph 2. Okay, so another straightforward argument essay. The next question we're going to look at was seen in London on the academic exam, 16th of June 2012. Many countries import food materials from other countries. There are several advantages and disadvantages to this process. Do you think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? Okay, now many people get confused when they see essay questions asking them about advantages and disadvantages. If you see a question that asks you about advantages and disadvantages, that does not mean that you are immediately going to decide to write a discussion essay. the important thing is to look at what the question portion of the overall essay question is asking you. So the question is saying, do you think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? Now, a plausible response could be to say yes, or to say it is agreed that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, and then you would go on to discuss the merits of the advantages, and perhaps even supply maybe a short paragraph to talk about the drawbacks to the disadvantages, or just to talk about the disadvantages of the process. So this would be somewhat of an argument essay structure. That's fine. The question here is not saying analyze both the advantages and disadvantages and state which you think outweighs the other. That's not what it's asking us here. It's simply asking us which side do you think is stronger. So you could write an essay with a thesis that just focuses on the advantages, or a thesis that states that the disadvantages are more prevalent in this issue. Okay. Now that said, we could go through this essay and write it in a discussion essay style. That would be possible. So basically we would spend the essay, the first supporting paragraph talking about the advantages, the second supporting paragraph talking about the disadvantages, and then in the conclusion paragraph talking about whether the advantages outweigh the disadvantages or vice versa. So basically sharing our opinion at the end. But the way it's worded here, it could be either essay structure. Okay, now I have one more question that I want to analyze with you. This is an essay question that appeared on the academic exam the 16th of June 2012 in Australia. City dwellers do not tend to develop close relationships with their neighbors. Why is this so, and what can be done to improve contact between neighbors within cities? Now, these are the sorts of questions that I do not like, and I'm sure many of you are the same way. Now let's go over the essay question and the different parts that it is made of. So the first sentence gives us a bit of a background statement. City dwellers, dweller just means a person that lives or inhabits an area, do not tend to develop close relationships with their neighbors. So it's just saying that people who live in cities tend not to be very close with the people they live next to. Now, these sorts of questions can be tricky. Why is this so, and what can be done to improve contact between neighbors within cities? So as you can see, we're actually being asked two things here. The first question is, why is this so? The second question is, what can be done to improve contact between neighbors within cities? Now, I just want to take a second and share with you an alternative question that sometimes appears in this sort of instance. So I hope this doesn't confuse anybody, but just bear with me for 1 second here. So if the question was to state something like, what is your opinion of this situation and what can be done about it? Okay, so now here what I've done is I've created another question that has two questions inside of it. Do you see? So here the beginning says, what is your opinion of this situation? And then the second question is, what can be done about it? Now, if you look at the first set of two questions, we're being asked something that is quite heavy in nature. Why is this so? Now this is the kind of question that is difficult to answer in a single sentence. This is the kind of question that requires us to provide a bit of evidence to show it in action and to support what our opinion is about this. However, if we look at the question down below, what is your opinion of this situation? This is the kind of question that we can answer very easily in a single sentence, and we do not need to provide any evidence to prove our own opinion. That doesn't make any sense. If I think something is wrong, that's just the opinion that I have. I don't have to prove, what it is that, I mean, this doesn't make any sense to provide evidence for an opinion. So I hope I'm making myself clear here. These two questions are different in nature, which means that the response that we would have to share would also be different in nature. Now the second question we're given is what can be done to improve contact between neighbors within cities. And here we have what can be done about it. Now these two questions are relatively the same, and I've written them relatively the same to help prove a point. So basically, let's forget about the second question for a moment, because those two are going to require at least one paragraph to be proved. The first question here, why is this so? So this is going to require us to write a supporting paragraph to show why this has happened. However, in this instance, what is your opinion about the situation? This is only going to require us to write one sentence somewhere in the essay that shares our opinion. Okay, and then the remainder of the essay is going to be talking about what can be done about it. So what I'm trying to show with these two examples is that the questions sometimes need to be prioritized. So if we look at the two questions down below, one is a much deeper question than the other. This second part, what can be done about it, this is going to take some time. We're going to have to use some evidence to show what can be done about it. What is your opinion of the situation is only going to take a single sentence. So you could state something like, it is felt that this situation is, and then whatever. And then you're finished for that part of it. Then all you have to do is worry about what can be done about it. In this instance, we're going to have to worry about both questions, and we're going to have to provide evidence for both questions to answer the essay question properly. So my suggestion here is to try to include both questions, if you can, into a single thesis. So something like, for example, it is argued that people who live in a city do not develop close relationships with their neighbors because of, and then whatever. Okay, so that would be kind of like the thesis portion of it. It is argued that people who live in a city do not develop close relationships with their neighbors because of, and then whatever your main point is. And then you would follow that with a bit of a continuation, which would be maybe this will be proven prior to looking at potential solutions to this issue. So let me just maybe type out an example here. So it is argued that people who live in cities do not develop close relationships with their neighbors because of, and whatever your point is, it could even be because of this and this. I mean, if that was what you were going to say. And then continuation. This will be proven prior to looking at potential solutions to this issue. Okay, so here is the thesis. to the above question and a small outline. So basically this would appear in the introduction paragraph of your essay. And what would happen is the examiner would read this and they would see that you are addressing both parts of the question. And you're addressing it properly. You're not just stating a one-sentence answer. You're setting up your supporting paragraphs to respond to the questions properly. So what happens is the examiner reads, "It is argued that people who live in cities do not develop close relationships with their neighbors because of this and this." That answers this part of the question. Why is this so? Then the second part of your thesis, which is kind of like an outline sentence too, states, "This will be proven prior to looking at potential solutions to this issue," which answers this part of the question. Then what happens is you will provide two supporting paragraphs. The first supporting paragraph is going to talk about these things. Okay, and you're going to have to provide a little example to prove or to show why your opinion is true or should be supported. Then the second supporting paragraph is going to suggest solutions to the problem. And again, this would best be done by sharing an example where perhaps this solution has been put into practice before somewhere else and had a good result. Anyway, I don't want to overcomplicate this. I hope I haven't confused you further, but all I'm saying here is that in instances like this where it's clear that this question and this question are going to require more than a single sentence answer, you're going to have to set up your essay like this. So basically you're going to provide a supporting paragraph for each part of the question. In the instance that your question, your double question looks like this, what is your opinion of this situation and what can be done about it? Here you're being given one question that can be answered very easily in a single sentence and a second question that cannot, which would mean that you would have to prioritize and focus on this second question more, which would mean that you would be writing two supporting paragraphs in response to this. There would not be a supporting paragraph in response to this, this part here. What is your opinion of the situation? That can be answered simply in your thesis. Okay, I hope that that is clear. So that concludes today's video. I hope that you found it helpful. Please, as always, leave me some feedback and let me know what you would find helpful. And thank you for listening and have yourself a nice day.